On December 16, 2021, Bangladesh and India celebrated the Golden Jubilee of their victory over Pakistan in the Liberation War. On that day, 50 years prior, the Bangladesh, at the time East Pakistan Nationalist Forces, with the aid of the Indian Armed Forces, would finally put an end to a conflict that claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. Since the partition of India in 1947, Pakistan had been something culturally normal. This was mainly due to the fact that there was very little integration between the cultures of the Muslim Pakistanis in the west and the Bengalis in the east. Naturally, this meant that it was only a matter of time until racial conflicts emerged between them. The war would start in 1971, when the West Pakistan-dominated government initiated a mass genocide of Bengalis. The war lasted several months and would spark the single largest refugee movement of the modern era.
With almost 10 million people fleeing East Pakistan, opting instead to settle down in India. One man among these 10 million was my grandfather. My name is Ronit Bhattacharya. I'm a grade 8 student here at UWCSEA. And today, I'm here to give a talk that I must warn will not be uplifting. I'm here to talk about a dark, grim topic with a heavy heart. The global refugee crisis. I'm sure we've all heard about it before. Today, nearly 84 million people worldwide are displaced due to war, famine, and poverty. That's about 1% of the world's population. It's also almost twice as many as there were at the beginning of the decade. So contrary to what many people believe, the refugee crisis is only growing. And the simple fact is that not enough is being done to stem the tide. However, before I go too in depth, what exactly is a refugee? A simple question for some of you maybe, but it is important to define nonetheless. A refugee is someone who has been forced out of their home country due to war, poverty, hunger, or fear of persecution as a result of their ideals, beliefs, traditions, race, or political views. This definition is what I found on the internet. But what that doesn't tell you is that a refugee is someone who has to fight for survival, day by day, struggling to find food to put on the table and a place that they can call home. That is the reality for 1% of the world. For the longest time, I couldn't imagine what it would be like. But in preparation for this talk, I decided to interview my grandfather. I wanted a first-hand account on what that life was like because I saw it as an opportunity to widen my perspective on the issue. I recount his story to you now in the hopes that it does the same for you. In early April of 1971, my grandfather had gone to a nearby village to settle some business. He would have no home to return to. When he came back, we found his town in ruins and his house in flames. Amidst the chaos, he managed to find his mother and flee with her. But the oncoming Pakistani forces had already murdered his brother. However, there was no time to mourn, no time to grieve, and no time to perform a funeral. Now, he had to run. My grandfather never before journeyed outside of East Pakistan, but he no longer had that choice. Over the next 3 days, he would make a grueling journey to the border, and from there, he would start a new life from the ground up. However, what really drove home to me just how terrible a life refugees are forced to live wasn't my grandfather's story itself. Rather, it was the fact that as he told it, he had tears welling up in his eyes. Now, my grandfather had always been the most stoic member of my family. He got through everything life threw at him over decades with a smile on his face. But not this. 50 years after the war, 50 years after his escape, and still, the emotional scar from the experience had not faded. Even worse, after 50 years, is the issue any closer to a resolution? No, in fact, it's worse than ever. The Syrian civil war, the Rohingya crisis, the Taliban conflict, the war in Ukraine, all across the world, people's lives are still being torn apart by needless war and bloodshed. Nobody deserves to suffer as my grandfather did, and as millions of people worldwide now do. It is our duty as a privilege to ensure that we give them the livelihoods that they deserve. Why? Because we're the only ones who can. Of course, though, it is very easy to talk about doing something, about inciting a change. A more important thing for me to discuss would be what exactly is it that we have to do in order to mitigate the issue? Well, what I see as the most influential action that all of us could take would be to ensure that our vote is cast in the right place. At the end of the day, the people who make large-scale global decisions on things like the refugee crisis will always be politicians and diplomats, not the general public. As such, the most important thing for us to ensure would be that the right people are in those positions of power. We must vote for politicians that pledge to aid refugees and displaced persons, and put an end to the conflicts that perpetuate the crisis. It would be a way to nip the issue in the bud, so to speak. Naturally, that isn't the only thing we can do, though. Another important thing to do, and important action to take, would be to help NGOs, volunteer for NGOs, fund them. At the end of the day, relief funds and NGOs, these are the people that help get refugees back on their feet. As such, it is imperative that they get the resources that they need. Now, I would like to take note of the fact that it cannot be me or you that does these things. It has to be all of us, collectively. Because the simple fact is that we have no voice and no power when we act alone. Only when millions of people band together can they create something that is bigger than themselves. Now, as I come to the end of my talk, I would like all of you to take away one key thing from this. And that is that refugees are people just like us, who think like us, who act like us, who feel like us. It's easy to forget that when their lives seem so alien, unimaginable for the likes of you and me. But it is nonetheless true, and that is why we must do whatever it takes to give them the justice that they deserve. Thank you very much.